Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you guys are. It was interesting. I saw an article in the Wall Street Journal this morning that was just talking about how people are coming out of law school and like this, with a lot of debt, and it's difficult to make money and or enough to pay your debts. And most people aren't paying back their loans, and something like two-thirds or more than that, I think, aren't paying back the loans, or starting to pay back the loans in a couple of years. And when I listen to that stuff about where people are, there's two parts in me. One of them feels very badly about it for the people that are experiencing this stuff. But the other part of me actually, because I've been hearing these kind of statements for years, feels badly that more people aren't taking part in webinars and things like this to learn about how to find a job. Because honestly, where I sit in terms of in this recruiting firm, we make more placements of people that didn't go to good law schools and aren't working at big firms, and we make of the opposite. There's so much opportunity out there. Almost every attorney that I work with is marketable. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone can get the high six-figure jobs and so forth, but honestly, there's a lot of opportunities out there in a lot of markets. And a lot of the reason for people not experiencing success is because they're not really listening to stuff like this or learning how to do a job search. And I feel badly about that. I feel badly that people may come out with knowledge, but they don't know how to use that knowledge to get positions or to really improve their career prospects. So this is a good webinar for you guys to listen to. All these webinars are helpful that I'm doing, because I just feel that there's literally so much opportunity out there that people don't see. And the only way to see it is to listen to people like me. And I'm certainly not the only person that understands this, but this is all I do and all I think about. And I work with all types of attorneys getting jobs. And frankly, even in our company, there's tons of opportunities. I mean, we're hiring lots of people to do recruiting related roles, so whether it's talking to people or talking to law firms or doing research. And we have probably 30 to 40 jobs here at any given time. So there's a lot of opportunities in this industry, and there's a lot of opportunities for anybody that's gone to law school that's willing to apply themselves and learn this stuff. And I can tell you, if you're smart enough to pass a bar exam, you're definitely smart enough to do extremely well in this profession, regardless of where you end up. So this particular presentation today is about relocating to different parts of the country. And this is one of the things that just blows my mind that people don't do more of. I'll just tell you a quick story. When I clerked for a judge in Michigan, and after my clerkship, there were about 5 or 6 big law firms in Michigan. And at the time, and now, but 5 or 6 that were paying, if you wanted to work. At the time I got out of law school, very kind of close. Like, if you wanted to work, my home was next to impossible. It wasn't impossible, but they just didn't have a lot of jobs. And they would hire, each of them would hire a few people every trip by all these great law schools, including University of Michigan, which is more than half of the people are from the Detroit area that go there. It was a very competitive market. And so looking at other markets was a very smart thing for me to do. Even coming out of a federal clerkship and having gone to a good law school, done well there, it still made it a very difficult market. I think that one of the most effective things that anyone can do, instead of complaining about the state of the market, is just apply to other parts of jobs in other parts of the country. You feel really attached to working in New York City, or you may feel really attached to working in wherever market where your parents live or where you grew up. But unfortunately, that is a very many times backward strategy that is going to do profound harm to your career prospects. And frankly, different people are different. That I would have liked the very conservative Detroit market. I would not have enjoyed working there, or working in Virginia, rural Virginia, and a very conservative market there, or even Washington, D.C. I mean, you have to work in markets and places that have people that share your value systems and ways. And you can often do like different markets. And it's a very important thing. And if you're relocating, the majority, you're going to have a lot better options many times than if you stay in the market you're in. So an example would be, if you're in a Tony, you try to get a Tony, and you're trying to work at 2 or 3 of those really top firms there, and you don't get a good reception, you may think there's something wrong with you. Unfortunately, that's a very myopic view. There's thousands of law firms around the country that are just as 3 in different markets. And so if you're suddenly looking at Dallas and Austin, Houston and Phoenix and Los Angeles, all these different markets, you're going to have a lot better chance of getting a job. And so many people have deflated expectations of what they're capable of because of getting a good reception in a single market. And to me, that is absolutely insane. I don't get it. One of the problems of locating, trying to find a job in your own market is law firms will often conclude wrongly that you're looking for a job because you're doing something wrong at your current firm or you're and looking at them. They're looking at you with a fresh set of eyes and they're not thinking of you in terms of a cast from some of the competitor firms. They're thinking of you as someone that's local. One of the things that's interesting is every year I see people that are relocating locally to a firm. Firm will see their resume locally and they'll get a job with that firm. And then someone locally will say something negative about them at another firm, like, oh, we were glad we got rid of that person and you got them. So bad reputation will look bad in the other firm's eyes that they're dealing with every day. So relocating to another market can be helpful. Just because a bad reputation takes a long time to earn. So having a couple of bad experiences as a junior attorney, no one's going to hold against you, even with 1 to 2 years of experience. But if you've been out a long time, then certainly then things come to you in a negative way. So I think that from my personal standpoint, relocate to different markets is one of the smartest things you can do. And it's really a very good thing to do in your job search. Law firms are you're much more likely to get jobs when you look at them multiple markets. I don't get it. Most people, when they're looking for a job, only look at that one market very seriously. And if you're in Cleveland and you're only looking at the Cleveland market and you're not looking at other markets, if you're like a patent attorney and you're looking for a job in Cleveland, there might be 4 or 5 jobs tops. If you decide to expand beyond the Cleveland and look at all the markets in Ohio and the Midwest and maybe 10 other states, you're suddenly looking at hundreds of jobs. Why wouldn't you want to increase your odds by hundreds of times? I just don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me why most attorneys don't look at markets. It's the fact impossible to get a job. And people that are complaining that they're not making enough money, they have to take a job with the government, that they had to take a job with a public interest, often are just not searching in enough markets and looking in enough places. And cold calling with resume, not an application, enough law firms. This do to be successful. And if you're not doing this, you're holding your back. This would be like a company. Imagine if Coca-Cola opened up in Austin, Texas, and was just trying to sell Coca-Cola in Austin, Texas. It never tried to sell itself in multiple markets. It said, wow, this is a really hard job because no one's buying us. Or maybe let's not even take Austin, Texas. Let's take an area where it's really cold, Fairbanks, Alaska. If they were trying to sell Coca-Cola in Fairbanks, Alaska, this chilled beverage, and no one was buying it in Fairbanks, Alaska, and they thought, wow, we're just a real failure. We're not a desirable market. Different people are a desirable product. Different people will appeal to different markets in different ways. So you need to be looking at multiple markets when you're looking for a job. If you're not doing this, you're just holding yourself back. You're limiting yourself. You're only seeing a portion of the opportunities at one time. There's hundreds of legal markets in the United States. Some are large, others small. But if you're looking at more, you're going to create your odds of reviews and more offers. And when you're a young attorney, meaning you're out of law school and you're trying to get a foothold and claw your way up, the most important thing you can do is get experience. You don't need to worry necessarily about the prestige of your law firm, but you want to get the best job you possibly can in the best training you possibly can. And the only way to get best training is to really look at as many markets as you possibly can and make sure you get into the best firm you possibly can. I was so fortunate that I decided to apply to more markets than when I was entering my clerkship than just work in Detroit or go back to a firm in New York I was going to work with, where I would have been a corporate attorney. First, when you start looking at more legal markets, I've seen attorneys that have been looking for jobs for months or years, in some cases, markets like Detroit or Orlando or Minneapolis. And then they come to work with me and I talk them into working and looking at Palo Alto, Chicago, or Dallas. And all of a sudden they're working for a major law firm in Palo Alto, working on cutting edge deals before they were working with small companies in Kansas City. It's just the odds of, if a recruiter gets involved and can see your strengths, or the company that, is sending you jobs to approve and can help you, and you're applying to other, our company or however you're getting jobs, and you're applying to other places, you're going to take your career to the next level. I've seen attorneys not understand that their prospects don't expand when they look at the number of markets. It just goes to show that, I mean, that what you think is in demand in your market is never going to necessarily be the same in other markets. So I've seen people that are blackballed in a market. I've seen people blackballed in San Francisco. I've seen the markets all over the country. And for whatever reason, they have a bad reputation, or they're not getting jobs, or they're maybe just their resume doesn't appeal to employers there. All of a sudden, they look at other markets, got 10, 15 job offers. It just is insane that people will allow themselves to be subjected to whims of one market when there's so many opportunities in other markets. Typically, markets will go through recessions, they'll go through booms, and they'll go through bust. So what will happen a lot of times is at a market like New York City, corporate will become overly saturated with corporate attorneys, and there won't be enough opportunities. And corporate attorneys will refuse to New York because of whatever the hell it represents to them. They think they need to work in New York, and they won't be able to get jobs, and they'll sit there doing nothing, playing video games and watching Netflix for years. At the same time, their peers will go look at other markets. And the last recession, New York was hit very hard, but Texas kept going. It was a great market. California was going for longer than New York. It's still a good market for a while. But Texas was going almost all through the recession because there was a lot of oil demand. So people that were smart enough to apply to jobs in Texas did well and worked in major firms. So you just don't know what's out there until you start looking. Markets like you don't know. Sometimes it's even overseas. But it's very simple mathematical reasons many times for the certain practice areas: trademark, ERISA, benefits, tax, antitrust, healthcare, patent prosecution, project finance, and others that often have limited opportunities. I've seen instances where project finance is one example where there weren't hardly any jobs in the United States, or the few jobs that there were extremely competitive. And then all of a sudden, I've taken project finance attorneys and gotten them jobs in Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Abu Dhabi when they may have been unemployed for months or years. Same thing with employee benefits. I had one candidate who's incredibly, the partner she was working for was killed by her boyfriend. Poor woman was unemployed for 2 years and in Chicago and couldn't get a job. And I got involved and got her a job at a firm taking over their ERISA practice within a couple of weeks. And I think it was in Texas, and she'd never even been to Texas. So the point is, like, there's tons of jobs out there. Sometimes in New York City, there's no tax openings all over the country. And if you need jobs in your practice area, the only thing you can possibly do is open your job search to different areas. You have to do that. You have to be smart. Your career is too important not to look at other areas where there's likely to be opportunities. It's just like I told you earlier about the project finance attorneys. Each week, whatever reason, managed to drill into the head of our recruiters that work here and everybody that works here, and patent attorneys in particular, that you need to look at firms all over the United States. They didn't do the patent bar as like a national certification. Once you get into the patent bar, you can practice patent law in any state. So patent attorneys typically will get jobs all over the country. I've placed patent attorneys that are retired, that have been retired for 10, 15 years in places because of their experience where they don't have those people. I've placed patent attorneys. Listen to this. I once placed a patent attorney who wanted to go to, he was from Texas. He'd never been out of Texas, but decided he liked hiking with his wife on the weekends and thought it would be fun to move to Seattle. I sent him to a firm in Seattle, but unfortunately, their hiring for the Seattle was done out of It was done out of, I don't know, Philadelphia or something like that. So this guy got on a plane and flew to Pittsburgh and got hired in Pittsburgh, never even been out of Texas. And he was making something like $50,000 a year. This was years ago, in a small firm in Texas, and got an offer for $180,000 a year working in Pittsburgh. And moved. And the first thing he did was buy a Suburban, and then he got kicked out of his apartment because he was raising chickens on the porch. I'm not kidding, with his family. So there are so many opportunities, and he was a smart guy. He gotten like a PhD or like a graduate degree or something in bio something, and got this job. And he'd never even been out of the state. So you just have to remember that there's so many opportunities for you if you start looking at other markets. And I don't understand why people don't do it. If you want to work in a big law firm, your goal is to work in one of these super high paying law firms and you don't think you have the qualifications. You probably do if you want to work in a branch office in the middle of nowhere. I've had people hired in markets you wouldn't even, states I don't even remember that are so small. And I don't know, Nebraska and Kansas is a small state, but places that you don't typically think of. Idaho. I've had a lot of people hired in Idaho because there's big firms there. And many times if you decide to look at one of those areas, those firms are going to be interested in you. They will be interested in you if you don't even fit like the typical criteria a big firm attorney should look like, because they don't have a broad search, because that a lot of firms have ongoing trademark practices. Benefits are another one. And the more narrow your practice area, the more likely you are to be able to get a job in more markets. Another example is like education attorneys. There's practice areas where people do nothing but education, and there's firms that do nothing but education law. And most education attorneys in most markets, there's a few firms that do it. When you expand your reach and you look all over the country, education law attorneys are extremely marketable. So there's tons of opportunities. And most people in most professions will look at opportunities in multiple markets. And if you're in a slow market, and there are a lot of slow markets out there, you can't afford to not look at more markets. If you're in Chicago and it's slow, you can't afford to not look at more markets. If you're in Florida and it's slow, you just can't do it. Your career is too important and your job is too important not to do it. And you need to keep getting experience. Anytime someone has a gap on their resume and is underemployed or not doing what they can, it sends a bad signal because it shows you're not really going out and getting the results from your job search and the research that you should be doing. How would you feel if your client was you and you were looking and your client needed a job? And you were their attorney and you were paid hundreds of dollars an hour to do that? Would you tell that client to let's just keep praying and hope that some patent openings come along here in Akron, Ohio? We'll just do what we can and we'll just keep watching the market. Is that a good attorney, or would a good attorney come to you and say, listen, you need to look at every market in Ohio and every law firm in Ohio. You need to look at other markets around the Midwest, and you need to understand who does the exact type of patent law you do in every firm in the country so you can get a job there. If people are telling you to pray and hope, and that's ridiculous. That's just absolute asinine. And I hate it because this is the way the market is. And this is what law schools teaching you to do sometimes. And I'm not mad at the law schools. I'm not saying they're doing anything wrong, but you need to understand that you need to look at every possible market you can, and you would be out of your mind not to. It's very low and Texas gets slow. And it doesn't really matter when the financial markets slow down, the Bay Area gets slow. It's just, all this stuff is nothing you can fix or even need to understand. What you do need to understand is you need to look at other markets, and you need to always look at other markets. And it just happens consistently. There's often fierce competition to get jobs in other markets. But when the market slows down, there's going to be regions that are not slow. Would you believe that I saw a literal feed during the fracking boom, which is years ago, but there was a boom. Anybody that wanted to could march into a law firm and get a job in North Dakota. I wouldn't think that you would think that was that impressive, but I was getting people interviews in North Dakota several times a week. Now, you don't even think about North Dakota, but there was so much demand there that it was so, not that everybody wants to go to North Dakota, but the point is that the jobs paid very well. There was more demand. And meanwhile, you've got attorneys sitting on their thumbs complaining about the job market and reading these periodic or online magazines or whatever, blogs talking about how bad the market is and how sad people are. It's ridiculous. There are so many freaking jobs out there, and you need to relocate if there's not jobs, and you need to find those jobs. During economic downturns, our recruiters have always done well, that have looked at other markets. Now, some recruiters, like job seekers, are of this myopic view that the only jobs are in a certain market, and they get focused on this idea that I only make placements at big firms in New York, or I only do this. But the ones that are able to get out of that mindset and say, okay, if things aren't going well in New York City, what about the suburbs? What about upstate New York? What about smaller firms? And what about this and this? Because the work is always somewhere. Work just doesn't disappear. There's always people that are busy. There's always things going on. You just need to know how to find it. And there's always firms that are under marketing their jobs and aren't able to find people. So you need to do a broad enough search. And if you're in a market where you see no future, you just can't afford to not look at more markets. People get in these very, I don't know, they get boxed in. They think, I have to stay in this relationship. I have to stay in this job. I have to stay in this city. I have to stay in this house. I have to stay close to my wife's parents. I have to stay close to my husband's parents. I have to stay close to my parents. My kids can't switch schools. My can't, whatever. None of that does any good if you're depressed and you don't have a job. And you cannot control what's happening in your legal market. If a factory closes, that's not your problem. That's not something that you caused. And if that factory has all the legal jobs and is supporting the market and the hospitals and all your potential clients, then you need to move. It's as simple as that. That's what people do all the time. And it's just how it works. And many attorneys need to move. And you will be well served many times by relocating. And it can be limiting working in small markets. It can be limiting working in large markets. It can be limiting working in the largest markets. I think many times people want to move out of small markets sometimes because, granted, if you're working for smaller clients, the work is going to be limited and the work is not going to be as sophisticated and the income that you can make isn't going to be as large. And you may not get as much respect from larger clients. It may be harder to bring in larger clients. All that is true. And so you may want to leave because of those reasons and go to a larger market. And if you're very aggressive and want to do as well as you can. On the other hand, if you work in a major market, you may conclude it's going to be impossible for you to ever be a partner in that market. In some firm, if you want to do that in a major law firm in New York City, none of this stuff is impossible, by the way. I've met people that have come to me and have been students of the stuff I've written and then have taken what I've taught them and learned from other people as well and have risen the ranks to become partners in the biggest firms in the country. And you can do that as well. Impossible. You can become a partner anywhere you want, but you have to learn it. And it's not impossible. None of this is impossible. If you provide more value than you're taking, the law firm's always going to make you partner. You just have to figure out how to do that. But the point is that if you believe from whatever you're not willing to pay the price that it takes to become a partner in most law firms, which all it is providing more value, way more value than you're taking, then you can relocate. You can go to a major city. You can do whatever the heck you want or a smaller city. And I relocate people to small markets all the time because they want a different lifestyle or they want more guarantees about advancement. That's it. Or you may feel limited by the culture in the city. I relocate a lot of people away from small southern cities in South Carolina and things like that, where it's not incestuous, but everyone that works together knows each other and knows their family and does everything together and socialize together. It's just, there's certain markets that are like that. And if you don't want to be part of that, then you can relocate. So people can be limited by culture. You can be in markets that could be, and I'm not trying to be rude here, but you could be in markets where you feel are very limiting. The people are too conservative or they're not open-minded enough about people from different backgrounds or religions or orientations or races or who knows. Or you could feel that certain markets are too liberal for you. I don't care. I'm not involved. But the point is whatever you want, you should be in a market where you're comfortable. And if the market is doing well somewhere else, you can't afford not to look at more markets. One of the things that I grew up in a town, in Detroit, where everyone talked about the auto industry all the time. And the big thing with auto salesmen, an auto salesperson will always try to work in the best possible firm at the firm where the most cars are being sold. They don't want to work sorry, just fixing something here. They don't want to work they don't want to sell cars that no one's buying, but they want to sell cars that are easy to sell. So they'll always move to the firms where they can make the most money and sell cars most easily. It's considered a good job to be an auto salesman in a Porsche dealership. It used to be a Honda dealership, a Toyota dealership. And so the better the product, the more business there is and the more people want to buy the stuff, the better off you'll be. The point I'm making is that you really need to work where there's opportunity, where people are buying your services and where there's demand. Why would you want to work in a market where no one wants you or there's not enough need for you? You're just going to feel badly about yourself and it has nothing to do with you. It doesn't matter, by the way, where you went to law school or how well you did there or even your past experience. If you go somewhere and you put your head down and you work hard and you provide a lot more value than you take, you will do well. That's all there is to it. You need to commit and that's it. So it's not really, none of this is brain surgery. But recently I placed 2 attorneys from small firms in Indiana into major firms in the Bay Area. I place attorneys from all around the Midwest. Just fix this problem. into major firms all the time. I mean, people move from Detroit to New York City. They move from all sorts of markets to other places all the time. And this can not only change an attorney's income, it gives the attorney more credibility when you can move to a bigger market if you want to do that. And sometimes better career prospects. If you're in a market that's slow and you don't feel like you're doing well or you're going through the motions, then you can move to another market if you want to. If you have skills that are common in one market and demand elsewhere, you often can't afford to look at other markets. So an example again is New York City. Like New York City, there's a lot of corporate attorneys there. If you want to look at other markets, then there may be a lot of opportunity and a lot of demand for you. And there's other markets where there's none in New York City. And there are times when certain practice areas are very active in some markets and not others. So it's just, these are things to think about when you're looking for a job. And the patent has always been very popular, and there's been a lot of patent attorneys and IP litigators in the Bay Area, not as many elsewhere. Litigation, there's so many litigators in Washington, D.C., so many very skilled and very good litigators in Washington, D.C. But they're less common with those kind of qualifications elsewhere. Same thing with us. But the odds are, regardless of your practice area, the odds are pretty good that it's going to be in demand in other markets around the world or country. You have to think about the market as a fluid type of thing where your skills are going to be in demand one place and not necessarily others. And sometimes when you get 5, 6, 7, 8 years of experience, you would be considered senior. And it can be very difficult in very competitive markets when you have a lot of experience to find jobs in law firms, because these law firms need to have work to support their higher billing rates. They need to have they need to value your skills, and they need to have enough work that they can make you partner or advance you without you having business. And these are challenges that you face. And so one of the only ways for attorneys in that position to be able to get new opportunities by looking at new markets. And I can't really overemphasize this enough. I place attorneys with no business in firms all over the country. I've had so many instances, and they happen several times a month, where there's an attorney without any business or any work, and by relocating them to another market where they were unmarketable, where they couldn't find a job, where they didn't even have contacts, where there was a demand for them, I'm able to get them a job. I told you about the attorney. It was actually Indiana, not Chicago, placed in Texas. Immigration attorney, unmarketable Texas, placed in Seattle. Bankruptcy attorney, unmarketable Detroit, placed in New York City. Senior tax attorney, unmarketable in Los Angeles, placed in upstate New York. Senior patent attorney, unmarketable in South Florida, placed in Washington, D.C. And so most of these attorneys wouldn't be getting jobs if they didn't relocate. So if you're sitting around depressed about the fact that there's not enough work in your current employer, or there's not enough opportunities, or you can't get a job, or you're graduating from law school and you're worried about the market and whatever market you're trying to work with, you need to think about the fact that the United States is a huge area of a couple thousand miles long. It's just, you have to be like, there's so many freaking opportunities out there. There's tens of thousands of law firms. I don't know how much clearer I can possibly be that how many opportunities there are. If you're in a major market and you're not getting love from top law firms, and they don't like the fact that you didn't go to a top law school and do great there, and you're not working at a great firm and you think you need to work in a big firm, then why wouldn't you look at other markets? If you're trying to work in a major market like Los Angeles or New York or Chicago or San Francisco, do you know how many people are also trying to do the same thing as you? You would have to, if you're a major law firm with an opening in one of these markets, they're going to get more than enough application, and they will choose the best. They don't care where it comes from. They don't care if it's from a recruiter. They don't care if it's someone that walks in off the street. They've got the money. They've got the work. They will take the best person they can get. And if you don't think you're the best person for most jobs, then you've got a problem. And if you're in a major market, then you are probably not going to be the best person for most jobs. And it doesn't matter if you have connections, if you know someone, they're going to hire the best person, wherever the freaking person comes from. That's what they do. That's what their self-interest is. That's what you would do if you were in their situation too. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're applying to places that don't have openings and you're the only person, that's a very smart thing to do. If you're applying to firms that and other markets that aren't getting a lot of applications, then you look like the best person. That's a very good thing to do. But there is so much competition. I don't need to tell you how much competition there is, because you know it. And if you're only looking at the jobs that are coming through, whatever type of search you're doing, and you're not looking at more jobs, you're making a mistake. I don't care who you are. If you're afraid of rejection in this business, that's a real problem too, because attorneys, by the way, this is what we do. We get rejected. We get rejected by top law schools when we apply. We get rejected by law firms when we apply. We get rejected by courts, most of us half the time, some less than half the time, some more than half the time. When we're litigating, we get the bad end of contracts, we get fired, we get all sorts of things happen to attorneys. That's what you do. You have to be used to rejection. No one cares if you got rejected 5,000 times or 100 times. All they care about is the results you ultimately get. So you need to go out there and apply to more places and get rejected. An attorney can often get a job in another market if they apply to firms in more cities. That's just the simplest thing I can tell you. You need to apply to as many freaking cities as you possibly can. You can't sit around and be depressed about the state of the market and worry about all this stuff. I see patent attorneys all the time unable to get positions. I see and make placements. I make placements like that monthly. I see corporate bankruptcy and real estate people that are unable to get position in major markets because the markets aren't doing well there, and then they get positions in other markets. That's just how it works. You have to be able to look at other markets when you're doing your search. And if you've exhausted all the firms in your city and have nowhere else to apply, which is often, by the way, not the truth. If you could try to look, if you really research the market and say you're a corporate attorney and you want to get a corporate job in your market, have you really researched the market? Have you really gone in, and if you want to work in New York City, have you really found the 7,000 firms that do corporate work in New York City and attorneys? Have you really applied to all those 7,000 firms? I don't know if the number is 7,000, but it's something like that. There are 7,000 places or something like that that do that work in New York City. And have you done the same with the 6,000 places in LA? Have you really done that, or have you only applied to the 20 places that you know about that are listed and pay all this money to be in now? This is insane. This is what people do. And then they get depressed. And then they think that they've done something wrong. What you've done wrong is you haven't been a good attorney and researched all the freaking firms out there and used Google and used every resource you can possibly think of to find who's doing the work you do so you can do it. And many people demand that they want to work in top law firms. They think that their self-esteem demands that they work in these very high paying law firms. And so they want to work in the highest paying law firms possible. And so then they decide that if they don't get a job in their city, there's something wrong with them and they can't pay back their student loans, and they go whine to the Wall Street Journal. This is crazy. I've been in this business for years, and I can tell you that if you expand your search to other markets, you're going to get much better results than if you're looking at just a few markets. And you can find places where there's opportunities, and you can find places where you can get opportunities. And if your search is time sensitive and you have a family to support, and you need to get a job because you're unemployed and that looks bad in your resume, then you should look at every freaking market there is. You have to be proactive. And if you're not being proactive, there's only one thing I can say to you: you don't want a job. So that's the Freudian explanation. If you're not being proactive, you just probably do not want a job. There's no other explanation, because the people that really want something get it. If you have a bad reputation, you may have done something wrong. I don't care what it is. You may have been sued for sexual harassment. You may have, and I'm not saying this is a good thing, but you may have gotten a DUI. I know one attorney that got his dream job and then went out to celebrate a couple of weeks later and got a DUI, and he was on the front page of the paper. Jesus. If you've gotten fired for doing something wrong, if you lied, if you made a mistake, then you need to fix yourself. But after you fix yourself, you need to figure out what you're going to do to get a job in another market. I knew one attorney that was working at a law firm in a smaller market outside of a major city that got fired as a partner because he had a rip in his jeans in the crotch and didn't know about it. And someone complained because they saw his underwear, and he lost a freaking job he'd been at for 20 years and got blackballed. I don't know what you did or what happened, but if you did something wrong, you need to look at other markets. And I'm not saying this person did something right or wrong. I don't really have any judgment about it. But the point is, you have to be careful, and you have to be very careful. I recently represented a senior attorney that sued his prior firm for sexual harassment. And he actually, I don't want to get into it, but everybody in the city knew about it. And he believed that his past prevented him from ever getting interviews and offers. He expanded his search to other markets, and he ended up getting a ton of interviews and offers. And no one knew anything about those lawsuits. I knew another attorney that was the managing partner of a major law firm and went into a meeting drunk. And I don't know why he was drunk. And the problem was, it was in the morning. I think he'd been flying. He flew to another city for the meeting and had some drinks and on the plane on the way there and showed up drunk and was abusive or something to the client or to another attorney and lost his job. And he cleaned himself up. He whatever he needed to do. He went to AA or whatever, and now he's a better person. And he was very honest about what happened to him. And now he's the managing partner of another big firm after not working for a year. And I was able to get him a job. So the point is, like, you look at other markets, and he got a job in a market he never expected to be working. I don't even know what it was. It was Nebraska or something, but a big firm, a big national firm. So the point is, you can get jobs if you make mistakes. You can get jobs if you don't have the qualifications that you think you need to get a job. You need to look at other markets. You can also, when you're relocating, you often dramatically increase your odds because the firm will presume that you're a much better attorney with fewer issues. So when you're relocating, the best reasons for relocating, by the way, are things like you want to be closer to your family. You went to school somewhere. Your significant other, wife or husband is from there. Your brothers and sisters moved to this area. You have good memories of this area because you went to school there, whatever the reason. If you have reasons for relocating, let these freaking firms know about it. They need to understand the reasons that you're interested in these areas. And if they understand that and they think that you're coming home and you're going to stay, they're going to want to keep you at that law firm forever. And these are reasons that are very acceptable to law firms. People don't really care about that so much in places like New York and the Bay Area, where they just assume that everybody should want to live in New York and everybody should want to live in the Bay Area. What's the big deal about that? Or work in the Bay Area. But for the most part, if you have reasons for wanting to live in a market, people will assume that you're likely to put down roots there and be a good employee and make the money for a long time. And that's what they want. And if you're from a smaller market or you have connections in a smaller to mid-sized market, and the firm has a strong enough need and doesn't have a lot of local talent locally, the firm's going to be very likely to hire people from outside the area. So let's just presume. So when I clerked for a federal judge in Bay City, Michigan, which is also near Midland, which is where Dow Chemical is and so forth, I can tell you that today, if I had decided after 4 or 5 years of practice that I wanted to go back and work in one of those firms in this area of Michigan, which is basically an hour outside Detroit, an hour and a half, that pretty much all the firms there, and if I said I really had great meetings or great experience living in this area, which, whatever, then the firms there would be interested in me because there's not a lot of people that want to work in Bay City, Michigan or Midland, Michigan or Flint, Michigan for that matter, which is not too far away. So the point is, any market that you have a connection with, you can always get jobs there. I see people going back to work in where I went to law school, Charlottesville, all the time. I love living in Charlottesville, and they get jobs after having worked in other markets around the country. So you have a connection to the market and you want it back there. That's a real plus. Law firms like hiring people that have connections to markets, especially smaller to mid-sized ones. These should always be on your interest list when you're applying to. And this is the guy again it was 250,000. Wow. I thought it was like 180, but this is the story about the guy in Texas that I told you about earlier. And he had to get rid of the chickens and leaves. That was a very funny story. And this is a true story. This guy is really funny, actually. He's in West Texas. I thought he was making less than 85. Yeah. And then he got $250,000. Wow. And anyway, funny story. And now he's a partner in a large law firm there. And that never would have happened if he stayed in West Texas, which is like Midland and that kind of thing. Law firms like cancer relocating. And one of the reasons is they tend to be more sympathetic. So you can often apply to firms when you're relocating and just say, I really want to be part of this market or want to work here. And they understand that they have one shot to get you. And they like that. They also respect it when candidates are interested in relocating. And they believe that this is a strong enough force that makes them in their best interest to hire the person, because people that want to be somewhere are much better than people that just want a job. If someone's moving somewhere and committing to that employer and the employer is hiring them, that's a real kind of connection and so forth. The odds are that the person, if they're picking up and moving somewhere, that they're going to stay and try to make things work. And they also believe that the people are going to be motivated to settle down and work hard, be less likely to leave. There's all sorts of reasons. But the other thing that's really very important The person doesn't look disloyal. They just look like someone who actually is loyal, that wants to be closer to friends or family, and they want to be in whatever the reason is. And they may want to be in a larger market where there's better work, and they may be trying to improve, or they just may want to be in a market where they're closer to family and so forth. So it's just not raising alarms when they're trying to do that. And when an attorney relocates, it also doesn't raise questions regarding if the person's having issues at their current firm. When a person starts applying, if you're working, for example, in Chicago, and you start applying to other firms in Chicago while you're working in Chicago, the firms in Chicago, even though you may have a great background, are going to be a little bit suspicious, especially if you're coming from a good firm that's been around 100 years. And it's going to still be around long after you're dead, probably too. So they're going to wonder, they're going to try to understand, why is this person leaving this firm? Are they having problems? Is something wrong with their performance that we don't know about? Are there political issues? What's going on? Most of the time, when I hire people, for example, from other recruiting firms to work in our company, despite my best efforts, those people are usually end up being problematic when I hire them. They don't make as many placements or whatever as they represented. Sometimes they have hidden substance abuse problems. Other times they may have, which is fine if you clear these things up. Other times they may have issues being with attendance. They may be people that have issues with attendance and all sorts of things. More likely than not, if they're applying. So typically the people I like to hire are people that haven't worked in recruiting firms, or if they've worked in a recruiting firm, they've been there for 15 years and have a good track record and are still trainable. But all these things are difficult to come up. So law firms want to hire people that are doing well in their existing firms. And if you're relocating within a market, the law firm will wonder, why would this person be relocating? What are they doing? What's going on? Like, why are they coming to our firm when they're just across town? Are they having a hard time getting along? What's the problem there? And they ask those questions because based on their experience, there's usually going to be some problems with someone that they'll hire locally. But if you come from another market and you say, I'm moving home because my mother and my sister and everybody lives here and I just want to be home, and I had a great experience working at this law firm in Los Angeles, but I really need to come home to Memphis and be close to my family. Firms are going to open up and they're not going to be thinking that you're having problems. And that's what they're concerned about. Law firms do not want to hire someone else's problem. And when you're looking at firms locally, many times they're worried about that. And those are valid concerns. And I'm telling you, in my experience, that it's been a valid concern that I have. It's often not always the case, but most firms are going to reach the conclusion that if you move from another firm, you may have been able to win political games. You don't have any chance of advancement. And there's things that are happening, or you have personality problems and things that are wrong if you're moving locally. And it's not always the truth, but they're going to be suspicious and they're going to look at you a lot harder than they would someone that's trying to relocate. Most of my placements, by the way, that we make are people relocating to other markets. It's just because that level of suspicion doesn't exist. So even though I may have an opening for a certain type of attorney to work in Orange County as a litigator, the people that they're more likely to hire are people many times that are coming from other markets in California that grew up in Orange County, not the other attorney in Orange County currently working in a competitive firm. Because like I told you at the beginning of this presentation, the most embarrassing thing that can happen to a law firm is for someone to make a snide remark at another firm to them about a law firm, a person that they've hired that didn't work out at their firm. Saying, I'm glad, I hope they work out at your firm and try harder than they tried with us, and things like that. That's just what happens sometimes when you apply locally. Now, it doesn't if you're doing a good job. But the second a law firm hears something like that, they're very embarrassed and they don't like it. And they're afraid of hearing that, because law firms and attorneys, just like you are with your peers, are competitive with each other, and they don't want to make a mistake. And they feel that if they make a mistake, it's much more likely to get back to them if they do it locally. You're going to hear something when you're interviewing laterally in your own market, you need to say things negatively about your own firm many times. So instead of saying, I want to move home, or I want to move to this market, or my spouse is from here, you need to say things like, it's not a good cultural fit. And the law firm's going to question, why did you take the job in the first place? And what kind of culture are you expecting? And then when you start giving results or reasons, they may not like that. And they'll think he's going to have, or she's going to have the same problems with us. The law firm will just assume you're not going to fit in with them either. Not a good cultural fit, basically the code region for people don't like you. And often they're not going to like you because they don't like the quality of your work, or you're not nice to them, or you don't get along, you're not social enough, you're too unusual, too arrogant, too different, and so forth. I don't know what the reasons are, or it could have something to do with the quality of work. Your work's not improving. They've given you a lot of feedback, but your work's not improving, and they don't like that. So that's not a cultural fit. Another one people say when they're looking locally, there's not enough work. And that's a reasonable explanation. But the problem is most law firms that have been around for a long time have work. And if you're saying there's not enough work, you're often talking about law firms that may have revenues of hundreds of millions, in some cases over $1 billion in revenue, and have been around over 100 years. So they always have work. The question is, they're not giving you the work. And so if there's not enough work, why aren't they giving you the work? And good attorneys who do good work are always given work. When I had the benefit, again, of doing a clerkship before I started my job and being trained by a very detail-oriented and judge that did an exceptional job, like helping me learn the requirements. And so when I would turn in assignments, they were perfect. So I started getting as perfect as they could be given my length of experience. Now I look back on the things and I'm sure they could have been 10 times better, but they were better than my peers that may have been prepared to do. So people gave me a lot of work and I had more work than I could handle when other people didn't have work. So the point is, if you do good work, you're going to get a lot of work at most firms. Everyone's going to want to work with you because they're going to want you to do good work for their clients. And they will give you work across practice areas. They will give you research. They will fight to keep you on if you do good work. And then once you get beyond 5 years of experience and you say there's no work, then you're going to be highlighting your inability to generate work on your own. All law firms go through ups and downs, but the law firms all realize that the second things get slow with them, if you're going to complain about work, you're going to get up and leave. So talking about no work is sometimes not the smartest thing to do. It's just showing that you're hopeless and you can't generate clients and people aren't giving you work because they're not maybe enthusiastic about your turning in. And this is your career. You need to do the best freaking job you can with the assignments you're turning in. Other people to say things like, an important partner with business just left and therefore I need a job. If that was a partner that was the source of all the work, why didn't he take you with him or she take you with him? Was your work not up to stuff? Because what basically happens is when law firms are going to be hire laterally, especially when you're from a city, they're trying to find your weaknesses, and they're going to find your weaknesses by probing your political choices, your alliances, whether or not people in the firm wanted to give you work and more. And the law firm is going to be interested in whether or not you're likely to leave at a drop of the hat as well. So that's another thing that's difficult when you're looking locally, because important partners are going to leave the firm all the time. They're going to leave their law firm. That's just how the business works. Partners leave and they come and they go. And, and if you tell a law firm an important partner just left, it's going to happen with you as well. Sometimes people say things like, I would like to do more sophisticated work. That's a great reason. I actually like that one, and that's one of my favorite ones. But if you say you want to do more sophisticated work and they ask you what type of work you're doing, the type of answers you get, and I gave this reason when I was looking as a junior associate, things like a first year, second year associate saying, I want to do trials, or I want to do more depositions and hearings. And that basically what you're saying is I'm a diva and I'm difficult to manage, and that's not good. You're trying to corporate attorney and you want to work on the case, larger litigations and things that aren't necessarily consumer facing. That's probably a good thing. But a law firm doesn't need divas. If they have a small litigation matter, they're paying you a salary. They need people to work on it. And so if you're interviewing with a firm and you say things like that, they're not going to like that. They're going to say this person's out of the running. Talking about the sophistication of the work you want is really going to separate you from the crowd in a way that makes you someone that shows you're difficult to manage. And if the firm knows that unless they give you a continuous flow of great work, you're going to be interviewing with their competitors across town and complaining about them, they're not going to like that. The firm's asking themselves, what about teamwork? What about personal relationships? These are all things, by the way, that law firms ask when you're interviewing locally. This is the problem. They don't ask these questions as much when you're looking across town, when you're looking across the state or you're looking at another market. They're more concerned about asking more pleasant questions. And you don't have to ask these type of questions when you're looking locally, when you're moving markets. So another thing people will say is there's not enough opportunity. That's another huge minefield. It means basically one thing to the firms interviewing you. You're not good enough to advance in the firm you're in. You're not making the cut there. You're not rising fast enough. And there may be multiple reasons. You're not enough business, can't work hard enough for some other reason. But the fact is, if you're good enough and you're providing more value, way more value than the law firm can possibly find in the market or anywhere else, then you're going to do well. Anybody can be a partner at any law firm there is. No law firm is completely closed to partners if you're smart enough, if you're hardworking enough, if you bring in enough business, whatever it takes. Every law firm has you can be part of. Anybody can be an Olympic athlete that works hard enough and has the abilities. You can do anything. If your goal is to be a billionaire, you can probably do that too. I met a guy that wanted to be a billionaire once, and I didn't think he was smart enough, and he became one. It's just it's anything you want. If you apply yourself and you want to do something, you can do it. So opportunity is a good one, and certainly certain opportunities are difficult. But if you start talking about that there's no opportunity at your firm, but you think there's going to be opportunity elsewhere, then that's going to come across as something that doesn't look good. You need to be on the right side of people. You need to look indispensable and everything. So when you talk about a lack of opportunity, what you're saying is that you expect to be made a partner, paid a certain amount of money, and sort of advance a certain way, you're going to leave. And that may mean you don't have the commitment and so forth. And then another thing people will say sometimes is, I'm evaluating my options and feel it's a good time to look around. And that's also a very common kind of open statement. And this means very little and is often a sign that something else is wrong. Before you start talking about evaluating your options, you have to realize that what you're saying is you may have been asked to leave, you're not doing well, and you could conceivably evaluate your options at any conceivable time of your next firm. Law firms don't like that, so you need to be very careful. Another big one that people talk about is morale is low. This is less common, but it's something that I hear a lot of times. I hear that about it at firms that have been around 100 plus years, at the most prestigious firms in the country, at the largest firms in the country. And all this means is when you say morale is low is you're just not on the right side of management. And instead, you're someone that kind of follows groupthink within the law firm and will not support the law firm through thick and thin. But really, instead of when this happens, and if they hire you, the odds are going to be the exact sort of person that's also going to be problematical with them as well and not part of their team. Another thing that people talk about a lot is that the commute is difficult. And that's a fair thing. Or now they're talking about the fact that the firm's not letting them work at home. But the point is that when you take a job, your job needs to take precedence. And if you say the commute's too difficult, people are going to ask, why did you move someplace where the commute was difficult? Or why aren't you relocating to be closer to the office? Shouldn't your job come first? And employers expect you to put yourself first. So when you put them first. So if you talk about your commute, you're going to raise a Pandora's box with all these criticisms. And each of these are valid reasons for relocating, by the way, but they're often not as useful in your current market. And they're going to penalize you, because then when you're looking in one market and not others, and only looking at your existing market, law firms are looking for reasons that you could be trouble. And these are all reasons that they see, because in their experience, and they have every right to think this, and I'm telling you this because it's true. In most cases, when they hire an attorney from their existing market, that attorney will end up having some sort of hidden problems, and they're buying someone else's problems, because people will not leave unless they're having issues at their current firm, or many times if they're moving to a much more prestigious firm, that gives the firms a good reason to hire them. But many times they leave for the wrong reasons, and they're just a problem that happens at the next firm. And law firms are just trying to run a business. They're trying to get through life just like you are, and run good businesses and be successful and do all the things you are. So they have to protect themselves, and you have to look at things from their point. So just in conclusion, and then what I'll do is I'll take a quick break and answer some questions. But as a legal recruiter in this place of business, one of the things that makes me very sad that I see are attorneys that remain tied to a market when there's no opportunities in that market, or there's very few opportunities in that market, or they're going to go on interviews and not get every job that they interviewed for because they give the wrong answers to questions, and they just don't look like a good person to the firms. And so you really do need to broaden your horizons by applying to more firms. I don't care where you went to law school. I don't care what your background is. In closing, I'll tell you one quick story that is funny. I used to run this business, and I don't know why I'm not running anymore, because it was such a helpful business, but it was called Legal Authority. And the website's still up, but I'm not really offering the service anymore because there's a bunch of reasons. But the point is that what this business would do is people would contact it, and we would send out letters and redo the person's resume, and then send out letters to all the firms in a given city that someone wanted to work at. And all these law schools around the country, people started using it to find jobs. They would use it, and I'm not offering the service now, so I'm not trying to sell it. But basically what the firm would do is if you said, I want to be an entertainment attorney in LA, the service would research and it would send you letters to mail out to the 500 law firms in Los Angeles that do entertainment law. And you would do that, and then it would send to the best firms or the smallest firms or the biggest firms or whatever kind of search you wanted to do. And the thing is, I got all these people would do this and they would get jobs, and it was crazy. You'd see people that went to these horrible law schools that are not ranked in different parts of the country. And they would use the service and get 5 or 6 entertainment off jobs in Los Angeles, when people that were coming out of Stanford couldn't even get a freaking entertainment law job because they were going the route and they were applying to all these firms. And this procedure works. And the reason the business closed down was because it being too difficult, because we were charging better. And then some people would only send 40 letters and then they wouldn't get a job, would leave a bad review. And you really needed to do broad searches of hundreds of firms and so forth to get it. But this works. This is the way to get a job. I saw firms in law schools you've never heard of in Florida, where people would say things like, I want to be an oil and gas attorney in Oklahoma or Texas. And they would send out hundreds of letters, get multiple. This way of searching for a job works. And I've been talking about this for decades now. And the reason I keep talking about it is because all these people, and I'm not saying there's a conspiracy in the market. If a recruiter at a competing firm only has 5 jobs, that's what you're going to hear about. If a certain organization only has relationships with a certain number of firms, those are what you're going to hear about. If a certain organization has people paying to list themselves with them, then that's all you're going to hear about. But there are so many freaking firms out there. There is so much opportunity out there. Anybody that wants to can get a great job. I'm blown away by the malaise and reading these articles about how bad the market is from time to time and how people can't get well-paying jobs because they're just not applying to enough places and enough markets. And if there's one thing I can leave you guys with today, it's that you need to really step it up, and you need to get out there and look at a lot of markets, because if you're not, you're just hurting yourself. And who's to say what appeals to one person and what doesn't appeal to another person? If you're being proactive in your search, you're going to appeal to someone and people are going to take chances on you. And if you remember the things I'm saying about working hard and providing a lot more value than you're taking and putting your employer first, you're going to do well. And that's really what I have for now. I would like I'll take a quick break. And then when I come back, I'll also take as many questions as people have. Okay, so let's get started with questions. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen and we'll start. Oh, actually, this is wrong. Sorry, give me 1 second. Sorry, apologize. Okay, so the first question is here. Is attorneys that you place in different states for job opportunities, do they already pass the bar? Or they already pass both state bars? Okay, so a lot of firms, there's certain states where it's difficult to get a job if you don't have the bar. Those states are, for the most part, are going to be like California, Florida to a lesser extent, sometimes New York, Texas, Delaware, but not a lot of people are there. But other than that, most states are pretty open to you if you don't have the bar. A lot of them you can waive into. There's a bar reciprocity chart on BCG, so you should look at that and check that out. But once you find that, that would be helpful for you to maybe look at that. But no, for the most part, law firms do not need where. But for the most part, you can get into jobs without having the bar there. California is more difficult, but you can still get into firms in California without it. All these states you can, and you can waive into there. And so it's not really that important. Okay. Let's see. And for big firms, a lot of firms for California, for example, will require you have the California bar because a lot of people take the bar and don't pass it. But other states, there tends to be a much higher pass rate, and it's not as typical. Law schools do care what university you attained your degree from, which is a question for someone that's a pre-law student. Certain law schools carry more weight than others. So a lot of colleges, the big thing for law schools is GPA and LSAT. But what happens is when you're a really good law school, so say you're like, this example would be Stanford. They're going to have maybe 800 people in the class, and they'll probably have 3,000 applications, people with 3.75 plus 178 LSAT. Out of that, probably 300 or maybe 500 will be from 200 And then I don't know, maybe higher than that, maybe 750 class of it. But I think class is 350. And I don't know what the numbers are. I'm just making these numbers up, by the way. I'm just coming up just to show you 500 from the top 10 colleges with 375 and a 170. And then maybe out of those, another 2,500 from other schools with the bottom, So obviously the Stanford Law School can be very picky. This is its goal, is to fill the class with people with a 375 and 170 on the LSAT, because this is what's reported or something close to that. They'll take some people with high LSATs and lower grade points. But in general, if you went to a top 10 college and they've got 500 people and they're going to accept, let's say they have 750 people like that. I don't know. Let's just say 500. They're going to admit the 50 with ultra competitive degrees, the ones that are really, that have low grade point averages, meaning average in the school, like a 2.6, and then 200 grade point. Unfortunately, I have some knowledge of this because I've been involved in this industry before, but it averages 3.6, which could be like Harvard and Stanford. So what they do is they just basically take everybody and they put them in a pile, and then they see who are the people that look like the best people for them to admit based on all this information. So the most competitive people, and then are obviously going to be some of these people, and they're going to take all these numbers. And if you went to another school, let's say you went to, Florida State's a pretty good school, but let's say you went to Oakland University, which is a school outside Detroit, which is more of a commuter school. They may still be interested in you, but with these people that went to the top schools that are much more competitive to get into, so your odds of getting to Stanford from Oakland University are not going to be as good as if you're on this state with MIT or Caltech. Caltech's not even a top 5 school, but it used to be. It should be. But that's just the point. And the idea is that they're going to that this is why they do care where you get your degree from, because this shows a pattern of very heavy achievement, socialization with all sorts of other competitive people. And it's that if you were able to have them at this school, that you're probably going to be a better student if you were a competitive school, getting an ultra competitive degree and that sort of thing. So that's just how they think. That's not always true, by the way. The reason I thought of Oakland University is I saw someone from there the other day that went from Oakland University to, I don't know, really good school. Like, I think it was University of Michigan, but then they graduated like number 2 in their class or something, just really awesome. And so it doesn't really, but this is why law schools care about that. And then it obviously looks better for when the resumes of the people that go to their schools have these other historic levels of really good school. Let's see here. I'm going to start trying to answer first questions that are related to today's presentation. So if people have questions about that. I'm a law student at top 10 law school. I've been a firm in a market adjacent to a major market. My interest is in litigation and wish larger firm in New York City. However, I'm seeing that the opportunities are primarily corporate. I'm far more interested in a career in litigation, but I'm trying to sell myself. Is it necessary to make the switch to get into a large at New York City? So that's a good question. And it's typically a very common question, but you have a couple different things going on. So New York is primarily a corporate market. If you look at it's not to say that it's all corporate, but it's primarily a corporate market. So if you look at the resumes of people in New York law firms, they tend to be, if you look at the New York law firms and the people that work there, tends to be mostly corporate with not a lot of litigation. You look at the resumes of people in Hawaii, for example, it tends to be mostly litigation without a lot of corporate. Meaning you might see 75% corporate, 25% litigation, and you might see. So that's just how it works. There's certain markets that are heavier one way or another, but litigation is an interesting market. So the problem with litigation is litigation tends to a business where, it's a much harder market to get into in New York than it is in a lot of other areas. And you shouldn't be doing corporate if you shouldn't be doing corporate if you really like litigation. Corporate is a much different practice area than litigation. And what you're saying here is you want to work in New York City. And I think that you need to be location agnostic and get the experience that you want. And you need to get a certain type of experience. And so the experience you want is litigation. And if you're drawn to litigation, you shouldn't do litigation. It shouldn't be dependent on you working in New York City. It should be dependent on where you get that experience and where you get the training. corporate is a very good practice area to be in, but it's basically very complex. And I'm not trying to very complex clerical administrative work that requires a lot of specialized knowledge. Doesn't require writing skills, doesn't require litigation. It's a lot of context intensive writing and research. So you have to enjoy research and writing stuff to do that. People that do this typically come out of backgrounds where they do English, philosophy, writing, etc. And that's what they gravitate towards. People that do this gravitate towards, but this is just what their natural interest. There's lots of schools of thought about career related stuff and like what you should be doing and what makes people happy and I'm oversimplifying this here because there are all sorts of tests and other things that you could take that would show you what you should do. But if your experience that you desire is in litigation, then you have to decide, do you like complex clerical administrative work that requires a lot of specialized knowledge? Because a lot of people do. And for me, it's not something I like, but I've done it. And I think parts of it are fun, but in this type of work, that means gravitate science and accounting and things along those lines when you're in school. If you like litigation, you probably gravitated towards English, philosophy, history, things along those lines, anything to do with writing. And so that's just kind of how it works. It's not always that way, but that's pretty much people that are good at those types of things like that. So here, MBA types, which are a certain personality of think writers, that sort of people that like that. So that's not, if this is what you should be doing. You should think along these lines, like what appeals to you. You shouldn't go into something that you don't like and you're going to fail at. And you shouldn't go into something where you don't have natural skills that are going to make you do well at something. And if you do that, that's not a smart use of your career. A smart use of your career is also not going to work in a market where you're not going to get the type of jobs you want. Now, there's plenty of litigation in New York, and some of the largest cases in the world are always happening in New York. So I'm not being critical of New York as a market, but you need to be very careful about going into a market where most of the opportunity is in corporate, not litigation. And there's lots of smaller litigation firms, and there's all sorts of opportunities to do corporate and so forth in New York City or litigation. But the point is that it's maybe not the best market. And if you want to do litigation, and this is what you're good at, which is English, philosophy, history, writing, and so forth, and you're not more of a math, science, and accounting MBA type, then you really should stick with what you're naturally going to be good at, because otherwise you're just asking for trouble. And I'm not trying to talk you out of something here, but the point of working, your allegiance needs to be to the work and not to the market. And just because you think it would be fun to work in New York and go out and be part of that when you're young and coming out of school, which admittedly it is, there's a lot of fun things about New York. It at the same time, it's not worth it if it's not something that is going to work for you. Okay, this particular question. Following up to the previous question, it was rejected across the board by large firms at OCI despite several callbacks. This was a very frustrating and upsetting experience. I learned from it, but the door is not closed for me with large firms. But is the door not closed for me? Am I permanently damaged goods? No, you're not. Jesus, you're not permanently damaged goods. Just because you didn't get jobs at OCI means, again, so everything I've talked to you guys about today is people limiting themselves consciously or unconsciously. People should not limit themselves. So what you're doing here when you're just applying to firms in OCI, and again, I don't care what law school you went to, OCI equals just the firms, just the law firms interviewing at your school, willing to pay thousands of dollars, interview candidates from your school. That's it. That's what OCI is. OCI is just the firms interviewing that are willing to pay $1,000 to interview at your school. I went to University of Virginia Law School. I have no idea what it's ranked, the nice school, but I also I'm from Detroit. So Detroit equaled 0 firms coming to school. And then I went to college in Chicago. Back then it equaled maybe 3 firms, maybe 2 or 3 firms to school. And then I also thought about working in Los Angeles, equaled how many firms? Maybe 2. I think Latham and Gibson were the only ones that came back then. I'm talking about a long time ago. Then traveled clear across the country, and that was for Gibson. That's it. Then now if I wanted to work in New York, 50, maybe 100 firms, 50 plus firms. See, 75 firms. I don't know. I don't know. So the point is like, that's what OCI is. OCI is like what schools are coming to, what firms are going to come to my school. Why would you limit yourself to that? I don't, this is insane. Like, why would anybody limit themselves to only the firms coming to OCI? That's like saying, if I wanted to, that's like saying, I guess I can't work in Detroit. Doesn't make any sense. Or, wow, I'm not going to get a job at Sidley or May Brown. I don't know what to do. Boy, I guess I'm out of luck for Chicago. This is what people do incredibly. So if you didn't come to get a job at OCI, then you need to apply to the firms that aren't going to OCI. And you need to make a point of doing it. I don't care how you do it. If you email them, if you apply, if you show up at their office, whatever it takes, you need to make sure you get through to the right people, you network with, apply, but you apply to firms that don't go to OCI. That's it. That's as simple as it is. You apply to firms that don't go to OCI at your law school. If you do not, you're not damaged goods, but you need to learn about this stuff. You need to listen to what I'm saying in these talks. You need to go back and look at old talks. You need to do, but the jobs are never closed from your law firm for law firms later in your career. I know plenty of people that didn't get a job at big firms, and it takes them decades to do it, sometimes 10 years, 5 years, but all you do is you just keep improving. You keep improving at what you're doing, and you commit to a practice area when you get out. You do the best you can. You learn about it and you apply yourself and do well. And if you're not getting jobs, then you're doing something wrong in your callbacks. Go and watch my interviews or my presentations about interviews, and go talk to other people. Allow people to critique your interviewing skills. Do mock interviews at your school that will do them. Do whatever you freaking can, but you're not permanently damaged goods. You're 20. I've gotten people, I'm sorry to get upset here, but I've gotten people that are 75 years old, jobs with top 50 law firms. I've never worked with. You're not permanently damaged goods. This is just ridiculous. I'm sorry, but you're not. Okay. Pure blurted out that I was moving to another town over midsummer because the living situation hadn't worked out, and I decided I wanted a new place for the summer. Pure did this in front of a partner. It wasn't anything scandalous, but I was embarrassed by it and for the private. How should I handle this in a volatile situation in the future? Okay, so you do. So I first of all, partner does not care. Partner doesn't care. Partner just needs work done by young attorneys, and no one cares about you. Partner's worried about mortgage. That's what he's worried about, or she's worried about. So you don't have to worry about the partner being, this is just ridiculous. It's not really backstabbing. People think they're doing fun stuff, but actually the person that's doing that looks the worst, and only thing they really care about is the work that you do. But how do you avoid that situation? You learn to keep information close to the vest, meaning you do not talk rumor about yourself to the wrong people. One example would be, you have to decide that there's a cost benefit analysis anytime you turn over information about yourself. So sometimes there's a value of being vulnerable. So you can certainly be vulnerable, but if you tell people something about yourself that is likely to hurt you, then you can assume that it will hurt you. So if there's something wrong, if you have a serious health problem, or you've done something bad in the past, then that's likely to come back and hurt, and people will use it against you. Any negative information you share with yourself, share with others as well. So let me just tell you a couple examples. I had one candidate one time that shared, I don't know why he did this, but he shared in an interview, he had a DUI. So incredibly, not a good idea. But the firm hired him, actually. The firm hired him, but the nickname they gave him was the drunk. And I don't, approve of this one way or another. The drunk. And that's what they called him. Entire time he worked at the firm. He never said anything about it. He didn't like it. And I'm sure that having that name held him back. People would call him on the phone and say, "You're drunk," things like that, to be funny. And the firm thought it was very funny. And he was actually a patent attorney, hired as a patent agent, and hired as a patent agent, never, despite having gone to a good law school and so forth. So was there any reason for him to talk about having a DUI in the past? I don't know. It had been 10 years or something in his interview. No, there wasn't. And I don't know why, if the firm thought it was so bad, and they thought it was actually funny, but they decided to call him the drunk. And that's what they did. And he wasn't even hired as an attorney. They hired him as a patent agent, which is an insult in itself. It's a whole separate discussion. So if you send people negative information about yourself, they will use it against you. If you tell people sometimes, I'm not saying that this is right by any stretch of the imagination, any negative information you share with a firm and will be used against you. And maybe and may. This is not just law firms. This is all employers. It's in relationships. It's anywhere, anytime you have dealings with people. Now, I'm not saying that it's wrong to share negative information with people, but people use it against you. They'll use it against you. I mean, I'm sure you've been in relationships where you've told a significant other some information about yourself that is very personal and deep. And then when you fight with them, so people will use negative information against you. You need to be careful about who you share things with. If you share, there's all sorts of negative information. There could be, health problems, disabilities, all sorts of things. It's just, what are you supposed to do? What is they're going to do with that? I was on an interview and they started sharing the fact that they had heard voices in the past and needed time off and they don't know what caused them. How am I supposed to react to that? Am I supposed to think that this is someone I want to hire? I mean, I don't know. And of course, I'll tell you with a straight face that I didn't discriminate against the person ultimately for the job they were interviewing. But is that a good idea to share all this sort of information? You need to be very careful with things you share with your peers. You need to look at that very carefully in terms of what you share. But can you speak to looking at different legal markets from an international perspective, i.e., foreign qualified lawyer who wants to work in the U.S. Okay. So first of all, if you're a foreign qualified lawyer that wants in the U.S., a lot of people that are foreign qualified attorneys get on these calls every week. And I think it's good to learn about this stuff. But one thing I'll say is terms, we'll hire people that are the most convenient. What does that mean? That means that if there are people that do not require visas and sponsorships in the U.S. legal system and have connections, likely to be hired first. Put yourself in the situation, just put yourself and now this doesn't mean that this is always the truth. Like right now, for example, a lot of practice areas like corporate are very much in demand. And in some cases, there's not enough U.S. attorneys to do the work. So they are hiring people from Australia and Canada and different places. But the point is that if you're a U.S. law firm and someone's applying from a foreign country that requires sponsorship and all this sort of stuff, and there's plenty of talent available in the U.S. market, then you're almost always going to be likely to hire the U.S. attorney first. There's no reason for them to hire foreign people. You have to put yourself in the shoes of the U.S. employer. There's so many attorneys in the U.S. that are underemployed, which is part of this talk today, that it doesn't make sense for a law firm to hire people that are from a foreign country that needs a visa to sponsor, potentially couldn't get sponsored longer than it takes to make partner and will need to get citizenship. And this is, they don't, why would anybody involve them in that unless they didn't have enough applicants? Or why would any law firm want to get involved? So you have to offer a hell of a lot more benefits than someone the firm could find on their own, someone else. Now, there are certain types of people that do offer more benefits. That could be you will stay, not leave. You have specialized training that the law firm cannot find elsewhere. But generally, it's not going to be enough for these. It's not going to be enough that you speak a foreign language. It needs to be something special. So these are just some things that you guys should think about when you're looking for candidates, or when you're looking, if you're from a foreign country, you need to be able to offer something to U.S. legal employers. And before you do that, you need to understand what that is. And so an example would be if you have experience drafting patents for, that are valid in Thailand. I don't know if there's such a thing, and there's a law firm in U.S. that drafts patents for Thailand and needs, if there's is there a Thai patent bar and needs people that have experience doing that, then that'd be something the law firm couldn't find on their own. If you have capital markets experience helping companies in the UK access US capital markets, and you're in the UK and want to work in the US, and the US need capital markets attorneys that can work with its British clients, that's something that could be helpful that they could use. But it needs to be something special. it's not enough to say to be from like there's a lot of people in Nigeria and China and other places that want to come to the US. And it's not enough to be from a foreign country and just gotten an LLM or something. You have to have very specialized experience that the law firms not going to find. I remember when I started practicing, there were at my firm would hire a couple LLMs from Harvard Law School every year to work in its firm, but interestingly enough, I think at that time there were like 100 Ls that were coming out of the program for international attorneys from Harvard Law School every year. And they would take two from each country. And the two people that had gotten the job with my law firm were the only people that had been hired out of the entire class by a US law firm. So that means 8 people had come out to get this LLM from Harvard and only 2 had gotten jobs in the US right after that. So what does that mean? Means that, and I am assuming that Harvard had a program into that is very different for people. And it's not easy. And so it's not just enough to get an LLM. It's not enough. You have to have very specialized training. And people spend an awful lot of money getting these LLMs each year. And it's up to you to if you think it's worth it. But before you get an L and before you become foreign qualified, try to work in the US, you need to realize that the US is extremely competitive for US attorneys, US educated attorneys to get positions. Okay, let's see here. Let's see here. This question is kind of an interesting question to find out. Our graduate law schools actually are lawyers. There's no reason that going to a top law school makes you a better lawyer than any other type of attorney. There's a lot of skills that an attorney needs. Ability to the LSAT is a test of reasoning that has a lot to do with your ability to figure things out. The test things, your drive to do a good law school is a sign of for drive and achievement. So no, it doesn't. Going to a good law school doesn't matter. What you need to do is regardless of the law school you go to, you need to get the best training you can from more senior attorneys and become a good attorney. People can become good attorneys regardless of where they went to law school, regardless of what their background is, regardless of what many wealthiest in the country and the people that are unlit covers magazines in different cities are always the ones that didn't law school. Is about getting business, bonding with people. It's about your try. It's about all sorts of things that have nothing to do with your ability to do well and test and so forth. What I can tell you though is people that are very smart and do very well in the LSAT and test typically are able to figure out legal matters much more quickly than other people, and that can make a big difference. But that skill can be acquired. The longer you are in a certain practice area, and the more experience you get, you're not always going to be confronted with a lot of new fact patterns all the time. So that's not really going to matter. But no, the law school you go to isn't really that important. What's important are things like your resilience, your drive, your ability to improve, and all that sort of stuff. I really want to get a career in healthcare law compliance. It's hard to find an opportunity. Please give me advice on how to get to these roles ASAP. Okay, so a couple things about these types of jobs. When you're applying for any type of job, your resume needs to show that you look like you could be a good fit for it. And what that means, what that means basically is your resume needs to have a scent of someone that looks like a healthcare attorney. So if you don't look like a healthcare attorney, then a healthcare law firm or someone with that kind of opening has no reason to bring you in. So is there anything in your background? Have you written things? Have you taken an LLM? Have you taken courses? What is it about your background that shows that you look like a good healthcare law policy compliance attorney? This is 3 things, by the way. So I'm hoping you meet a healthcare attorney that does policy and compliance related work in the healthcare industry. If you have that experience, all you need to do is research and find boutiques, find other law firms in different markets that do that work. And once you find that, then you're really in business. And so you need to find places that do that. And if you find places that do that, then you're going to be in good shape. But your resume the first thing is your resume needs to have a scent, like you are a good fit for this, or you need to get in the door somehow. So you can do it. Sometimes people can't get a job in a firm right away doing that. So that would mean you could take a government job in a market where you can get the experience. You could get an LLM, you could write law review articles, and you could do a variety of things. I don't know what those would be exactly, but you could take a government job, public interest job, just do something where you can get that related experience. And that's really, and then you could research once you do get that, find boutiques and other places that do that, or you can just get into a law firm that does that, does this work at a lower role to start. That's really it. And then transition and then move to a larger and larger firms. I've actually, and this is a good question, and I do have some of experience. I've had experience placing people actually coming out of LLM programs in big law firms, coming out of LLM programs sometimes without any direct experience of doing that type of work. But there's not a lot of attorneys in this practice area. It's a very good practice area to go into. Okay, let's see. So I answered this one. See if there's any other ones that look good. What is good advice for a mid-level M&A associated law firm wanting to transition to in-house? The big thing for transition in-house is you have to decide if you're actually at the right point in time to do it. I don't think an M&A associate at a good law firm will have too much trouble if you're looking at enough markets. One thing I would say to you is if you're trying to transition in-house, then one of the things you need to be concerned about is that I always tell people that are thinking about going in-house, you need to be very careful about going in-house too early in your career, because what can happen is you may, a lot of in-house jobs, especially higher level ones with big companies, they tend to fill them from their partner ranks. So if you think from law firm partners, so if you think you have a chance of becoming a income partner at a law firm or an equity partner in the long run, you're always going to have much better opportunities if you're able to wait and do that later in your career. So meaning you'll be able to more likely become general counsel at a large company. Most general counsels at large companies have a much better shot of would have had, have been many cases, partners in large law firms. And that's really one of the ways that it's much better. And I'm seeing if there's any other questions here. Okay, this is a good one. And then this is all the questions. Why is it up to law firms to teach lawyers to become lawyers in law school? The reason is there's just a lot of practical experience that goes into being a lawyer. You need to learn, I think there's a foundational element of law school where you learn about things like contracts and property law and torts and different things that lawyers need to understand to pass the bar exam. And then there's also the idea of learning about subject matters and spending some time studying things and learning about the law before you do it. But yeah, law firms are typically the ones that teach lawyers how to become lawyers. It's much different when you're working for clients. And depending on the type of client you're working for, there's always going to be different demands. One of the things that's important to understand is large law firms typically spend a lot of time and look at things in a lot of depth. And smaller law firms that are more consumer facing, I don't have the time to look at things in as much depth because the clients aren't paying as much money. And so different law firms and different legal environments demand different types of legal skills. And so a law firm will train you according to the type of legal that you need. And if you go to a small local law school, then you may be more likely to work for small local clients, but they would have to train you one way. Whereas if you go to a major law school, you may be likely to do either. It just doesn't, no one knows. So each legal environment and the clients have different expectations. So the only thing a law school can do is teach you generally about the law and then expect you to take that general experience and develop habits. And unfortunately, the way the legal industry works is that you do, I believe, pick up very good different skills depending on the type of law firm and lawyer you work with. So you can be blessed and work with a very good attorney at a law school and a very good firm, or just a good attorney that trains you well and get lots of very good experience. And then really become a good attorney. But the law school is not really going to teach you how to be a good attorney. And that's the mistake that a lot of attorneys make, is they assume that because they went to a good law school, that must mean they're a good attorney. Unfortunately, that the law school you went to has nothing to do with a quality of attorney that you end up becoming. And it's actually pretty funny. A lot of times people may go to Yale Law School or something and be given a legal problem and just go off on a tangent that has nothing to do with giving an answer or being direct. And these may be some of the smartest people there are that have gone to the best law school. Conversely, some people can give answers and come up with solutions very quickly. But the job of someone in a law firm is law firms will teach you to be direct with information, to do so in a way that gives the client the advice they want in a cost-effective manner based on the kind of resources the client has to pay. And there's just a lot that goes into what a law school teaches you to do compared to what a law firm does. And law firms are just awesome resources to learn. So thank you very much for all the questions today. And this is great that everyone is coming to these meetings in the middle of the summer. I hope this is helpful. Each week we do answer a lot of questions. So any questions that you do have each week, I'm happy to answer. And I do hope that this presentation was helpful in terms of showing you guys the types of firms and things that you should be applying to and really expanding your searches. Thank you.